The story begins as screams surround a burning ritual site at night. Thunder continues as fire crackles, and terrified human screams suddenly intensify. Desperate human voices plead while the distant lakeside house burns fiercely. An unseen child's scream rises somewhere inside the spreading chaos. 75 minutes earlier, the hidden ritual's outcome remains unknown beneath Evelyn's hymn. A solemn hymn carries through dark windows of the isolated lakeside home. Terminally ill Evelyn waits alone as the old recording continues. Evelyn's familiar hymn breaks during another sudden, painful, worsening coughing fit. Remembering Sarah, Evelyn describes the girl climbing the table to sing. She takes Julia's mace keys, claiming she might hurt herself. She returns Julia's keys after Julia explains that she lives alone. Evelyn asks why her solitary caregiver carries defensive mace on her keys. Thunder interrupts as Julia prepares the next careful bedside medical check upstairs. The record player continues while both women settle in for medical treatment. Julia brings her medical supplies upstairs and joins Evelyn beside her bed. During treatment, Julia checks Evelyn's blood pressure and carefully prepares her medicine. Evelyn repeatedly shifts between lucid memories and sudden confusion during their conversation. Evelyn recalls wandering all day while her parents trusted her safety. She carefully records the normal reading as the storm approaches outside. Julia charts Evelyn's condition while keeping every prescribed treatment on schedule. Julia promises to stay nearby whenever Evelyn needs help overnight. Evelyn unexpectedly becomes lucid again and apologizes for needing help. During bedtime prayers, Evelyn directly addresses Julia as her daughter Sarah. Floor noises draw Julia through dark corridors without revealing their source. Familiar religious words become an invocation seeking souls for human bodies. Disturbed by its meaning, Julia carefully watches her frail patient's behavior. A ringing phone interrupts Julia's search through the darkened house. Julia's father asks when she will return home after her mother's death. She insists work, not avoidance, keeps her from returning home. Still, Julia believes her mother understood that love despite their estrangement. Avoiding the subject, she promises her father they will talk tomorrow. The next morning, Evelyn suddenly fails to recognize her familiar caregiver Julia. Terrified, Evelyn arms herself against someone she believes entered the house unlawfully. Julia calmly explains the hospice visit while keeping her distance. She shows her agency papers, then returns Evelyn's weapon beside the fireplace. Evelyn credits her mother with teaching every artistic skill she uses. Julia studies Evelyn's old family photograph beside the crowded wooden work table. She describes her former work studying art and ancient burial cultures. Randall once buried Evelyn's anniversary gift at their picnic spot. Later, Evelyn shares paintings, research materials, and old family photographs with Julia. Evelyn's disturbing painted figures contrast sharply with her gentle daytime manner. She identifies Randall as Sarah's father and her estranged former husband. The old photographs preserve Sarah's place between both estranged, grieving parents. Julia admires the gold necklace, while Evelyn warmly accepts her compliment. Evelyn identifies her necklace as a treasured heirloom inherited from her mother. Later, Evelyn quietly repeats the corrupted bedtime prayer while Julia listens. Evelyn admits her altered prayer no longer directly addresses God. The invocation again asks wandering souls to take another human body. Repeated transfer language convinces Julia that the strange wording has purpose. While Evelyn rests, Julia begins studying the unfamiliar house more closely. Hidden objects and matching occult symbols prove Evelyn concealed more than illness. Randall arrives, names Julia through her agency, then asks to see Evelyn. He reacts with surprise when Julia says Evelyn was praying again. Randall pauses in the dark doorway when Julia clears her throat. Evelyn recognizes Randall immediately before their familiar insults briefly soften them. Evelyn asks for Earl, forgetting he died 12 years earlier. She asks whether Marlene remains with Randall. He says no. Randall and Evelyn briefly reconnect through their shared grief for Sarah. Evelyn still resents Randall for abandoning her after their daughter died. Randall insists Evelyn has help, but her expression remains visibly guarded. Evelyn ends their reunion when Randall turns back toward her research. Randall demands an ancient inscription linked to Evelyn's recent occult investigation. He also demands a mysterious object concealed somewhere inside the house. Evelyn insists nobody else knows where the hidden object was buried. Randall warns Evelyn her incantation makes the concealed ivory figure dangerously unstable. Randall grabs the evidence, so Julia forces him outside. Julia orders Randall to leave while he lingers beyond the doorway. Julia silently watches Randall through the window, after forcing him outside. Evelyn describes facing death alone since her marriage collapsed years ago. Evelyn admits she and Randall rarely agreed throughout their troubled marriage. Julia asks what happened to Sarah after their marriage collapsed. Julia urges Evelyn back inside as the cold evening deepens. Then Evelyn suddenly becomes violently sick before their conversation can continue. Her movements and voice abruptly become animalistic throughout the dark house. Evelyn snarls and chases Julia through dark rooms she cannot escape. Julia barricades herself while the possessed patient pounds heavy nearby doors. She escapes long enough to search for answers instead of fleeing. Evelyn blocks Julia's route, forcing her toward the concealed recording room. Julia finds childhood tapes documenting Sarah's worsening condition over several sessions. The earliest tape captures the child frightened, confused, physically unwell, and alone. Her familiar recorded song no longer calms the child's deepening physical distress. The frightened child asks her mother to gently brush her tangled hair. Her stomach hurts badly, yet Evelyn keeps the recorder running. Secretly, she tapes Sarah after falsely claiming the small machine was off. Angrily, the child knocks the recorder aside after discovering her mother's deception. Her recorded voice suddenly becomes openly hostile toward both deeply frightened parents. Another unseen presence answers questions the terrified child cannot possibly understand herself. Carefully, Julia connects recorded changes with symbols surrounding hidden cassette tapes nearby. Julia leaves the hidden recording room while ominous music grows louder. A dark bedroom door creaks slowly open, while Julia hides silently nearby. Julia stays hidden as sinister music follows the armed intruder's arrival. His companions sweep separate rooms, while Julia hides with defensive spray. Julia slowly approaches another creaking door, while the armed search continues. Without warning, Evelyn attacks one associate with strength her illness cannot explain. Julia hides in the bathroom as Edgar screams and swears nearby. Edgar admits fear while Randall firmly orders him to stay quiet. Still, the violent intrusion leaves Julia unable to trust Randall. Randall offers to explain himself, while Julia remains behind the locked door. From outside, Randall explains how young Sarah became possessed by the entity. He admits their occult experiments brought something dangerous into the family. That force entered young Sarah and eventually contributed to her death. Randall admits their carelessness prevented them from protecting young Sarah. His confession recasts the intruders as desperate would-be containment agents. Randall's armed men seize Evelyn before Julia can protect her patient. Randall apologizes as they lock Julia away and carry Evelyn upstairs. Evelyn warns Randall that nowhere can keep the statue safe. She admits she recovered the statue because she misses Sarah. Evelyn accuses Randall of abandoning her when she needed him. Randall admits guilt drove him away immediately after Sarah died. Randall reveals he translated a single word from Evelyn's recovered inscription. A different inhuman voice suddenly emerges from Evelyn's frail body. The presence describes the dying woman as a disposable human shell. It claims to wear Evelyn's body exactly like a coat. Peter recoils in darkness after hearing the inhuman voice speak. A man crashes into heavy furniture as the unseen attack begins. The entity attacks Randall's group and shatters their confident formation. A body thuds, then Evelyn giggles before unseen dragging sounds begin. Evelyn crosses the wrecked room while ominous music continues. A telephone rings while bloodied Evelyn sits silently nearby. Julia finds the exhausted Evelyn lying beside the large stone fireplace. Julia examines Evelyn's injured hand before moving her into a seat. Evelyn asks for something, but Julia firmly refuses her bedside request. Julia runs water while preparing to clean Evelyn's injuries nearby. Julia gathers supplies as Evelyn approves her improvised treatment. Evelyn asks where Julia can find a working telephone inside. Julia calmly reassures Evelyn that she will locate the household phone herself. The disturbing recording links repeated occult contact with the child's worsening suffering. Urgently, a recorded father insists they must bury their terrified, suffering daughter. Prayer begins while the recorded priest hears the restrained child's desperate begging. Tearfully, the recorded mother apologizes for placing occult work before her safety. Julia studies Sarah's old family photographs while the disturbing recording continues. Later recordings capture guilty parents restraining their increasingly distressed young daughter. Their desperate occult rituals increase the child's suffering without expelling the presence. The recording commands Julia to look closely at the suffering child. Sarah repeatedly begs her frightened parents to immediately stop the painful ritual. The recorded session grimly ends as Sarah's desperate voice slowly fades away. Evelyn confesses that she still blames herself for losing Sarah. Julia answers by explaining why she cannot return to her father. She deeply loved her mother, but feared witnessing her final decline. Guilt kept Julia away when her dying mother most needed support. Her apology became impossible when her mother died without reconciliation. Julia admits caring for strangers feels easier than facing family death. Julia ends her confession and orders Evelyn to remain nearby. Randall returns and reports that his missing associate Peter has died. Randall warns Julia that the woman inside is no longer Evelyn. Julia slams and locks the door after ordering Randall to stay outside. Julia asks Randall whether the ivory statue causes the danger. Confused, Julia demands that Randall explain his alarming supernatural warning. Julia reluctantly agrees to retrieve the statue for another dangerous ritual. Possessed Evelyn stalks Julia through dark rooms while carrying a knife. Julia calls to Evelyn while the knife-wielding woman stays hidden nearby. A door creaks open as Julia searches the dark hallway. Julia finds the ivory figure while knife-wielding Evelyn closes behind her. Randall urgently calls for his approaching companions to hurry outside. Father Thierry demands to know what supernatural danger Randall brought him. Despite lacking authorization, the priest joins Randall for another exorcism. Randall sends the group through the front, ordering everyone to stay together. The gathered men follow Randall toward the house through darkness. Before entering, Randall promises to fix everything inside the house. He warns everyone that Evelyn is stronger than she appears. Julia enters their ritual without understanding Randall's complete intentions. Another hidden tape exposes the original ritual's full brutality against the child. Violently, the restrained child struggles, while both frightened parents question her desperately. The recorded father asks whether Sarah remembers the previous night. The terrified child violently scratches her own face until her skin bleeds. Confused, the child cannot remember their excavation or identify her own school. On tape, Randall asks Sarah what memories still remain after the possession. Her fragmented answers expose the presence erasing familiar places and relationships alike. Sarah's recording repeats the invocation, seeking another body for the soul. A familiar voice calls Julia away from the others upstairs. The false mother repeats private words from Julia's recent dream. Upstairs, a woman resembling Julia's dead mother offers comforting reconciliation. Julia nearly accepts the reunion before recognizing the emotional trap. She rejects the imitation because her mother has not returned. The false mother feels cold. Julia orders her to stop. Julia moves through darkness, while the deceptive apparition cries nearby. Julia enters the marked cage and acknowledges what she sees. With her flashlight raised, Julia questions the strange ritual structure. Randall, Father Thierry, and blinded Edgar surround possessed Evelyn at the altar. Restrained Evelyn taunts the ritual group, while Julia silently watches nearby. Randall begins ritual words while Julia braces against the cage. Father Thierry intensifies the exorcism prayers as Evelyn fights against her restraints. The entity claims Sarah suffers eternally, then offers Randall her peace. Evelyn screams in Sarah's voice as the restraints and room begin shaking. The entity mocks Father Thierry's prayer as a sweet symphony. Randall and Edgar tighten Evelyn's restraints while Father Thierry keeps praying. The wrecked room falls silent before anyone returns. Peter, blinded Edgar, and Father Thierry lie dead together. A blood trail leads Julia away from them and toward Randall. Randall blocks Julia's escape and insists she cannot leave the isolated property. Randall invokes Julia's hospice promise when she begs to reach her father. Julia supports groaning Randall as he struggles to remain upright. He insists they can still destroy the entity before sunrise. Clutching the statue, Randall calls Julia the perfect fit, forcing her back. The unseen presence suddenly asks Julia where she is going. Trapped, Julia begs Randall and Evelyn to let her leave. The entity snaps Randall's neck through Evelyn's controlled human body. He falls motionless, leaving Julia without the final ritual guide. Julia searches the ritual cage but cannot find where the statue fits. The presence turns its attention toward Julia's unprotected living body. Evelyn laughs, while cornered Julia braces for another attack nearby. Speaking through Evelyn, the entity quietly addresses Julia by name. Julia rejects the threat and addresses human Evelyn beneath possession. She tells the grieving mother that Sarah does not blame her. Those forgiving words help Evelyn resist the entity from within. Evelyn fights from within until the entity's pressure suddenly recedes. Evelyn gasps as the violent struggle abruptly falls quiet around them. Julia embraces Evelyn and asks for immediate emergency medical treatment. Julia trusts Evelyn's restored voice and lowers her guarded stance. Without warning, human Evelyn attacks the caregiver who rescued her. Evelyn explains the entity dies only inside another living vessel. She must act while it remains weak, before her memory fails. Evelyn calls Julia the answer to all her desperate prayers. The entity cries, "Not again," during Julia's forced transfer. Evelyn walks toward the lake while screams continue behind her. Evelyn silently shushes the unseen captive while facing the dark lake. Bloodied Evelyn faces the fire while screams continue. Sarah's voice begs Evelyn to stop while the house burns. An unseen captive begs Evelyn for help from inside. Sarah's voice calls for her mother while Evelyn listens. Her choice transforms the freed patient into an executioner. The entity asks what Evelyn is doing as flames erupt. Sarah repeatedly cries for help while fire consumes the doorway. Several cries overlap while Julia desperately begs for life. A childlike voice joins the entity's shifting pleas. Evelyn listens as sinister music replaces the overlapping cries. Evelyn breathes deeply while glowing embers drift behind her. She watches alone while the captive's pleas vanish beneath fire. The burning house glows across the dark, silent lake. A distant hymn continues while flames consume the lakeside home. No other figure emerges as the structure burns behind the trees. The empty shoreline leaves the entity's fate unresolved. Sinister music lingers over dark water after the blaze.